भारत कीर्ति सीरीज।
Namaste everyone, it's a pleasure to welcome you back to Mauryalok. And today we shall meet, who shall we meet? The Swami, the king, the first Prakriti of the Saptang state that we have spoken about in the last episode. Now the Swami or the king was the pivot around which the entire state revolved. Before I speak about him in detail, I will tell you about two things I am not going to speak about. And what are those? One is the question of the chronology of ancient India, the exact dates where everything happened. We are not going to speak about it, although I myself have written papers on this and I agree that the evidence needs to be re-evaluated simply because it is a very long and complicated story in its own right. Perhaps some other time. The second question you may ask me is, why do I choose Chandragupta to talk about and why not Ashok Maurya? After all, they were both very famous kings. The reason is that our concentration in this series is on the Arthashastra written by Acharya Chanakya, who was the preceptor of who? Chandragupta. So that makes for a logical connection. Let's now go on. So who was Chandragupta? What are the stories around him? Like any other very famous personality from the past, there are so many stories and legends around him that it's difficult to piece out truth from fiction. He is said to be the son of Dhananand, the last Nanda ruler, or he is said to be a tribal. He is also said to be a goat herd. And I tend to think that this story may be the one which is true because Chandragupta was a self-made person. He was a goat herd who was once seen by Acharya Chanakya playing with his fellow mates. He was acting like the king and dispensing justice. Chanakya heard him, was impressed by him, picked him up, took him to Takshashila and brought him up, trained him to be a warrior and a king. After Alexander's short-lived meteoric streak, unfortunate invasion of northwest India, this subcontinent was ripe for unification. Chandragupta and Chanakya took up this very difficult task, collected an army from Swat. Swat, which was then called Udyan, is unfortunately now a hotbed of terrorist activity. But he collected the first army from Swat, also took the help of five other kings actually, including the king of Kashmir and the king of Nepal, and attacked the Nandas. They lost in the beginning, they changed their strategy, and after that they engineered a palace coup and finally Chandragupta became the king. Now when he became the king and he inherited the territories of the Nandas, he later extended them up to Afghanistan. How did this happen? This happened because one of the Diadochi, whose name was Seleucus, one of the generals of Alexander, who had taken over his territories after his death, took issue with the Mauryan Empire and wanted part of it for himself. Now, when Seleucus and Chandragupta met on the banks of the Kabul or Kubha river, the details of that battle, if it was one, are not clear. But when the dust settled, the territories of Arachosia, Jedrosia, in effect what that means is that the territories of what is now Pakistan and Afghanistan, including coastal Balochistan up to Kabul, belonged to the Mauryans, and in return Chandragupta gave 500 elephants to Seleucus and thus inaugurated a long era of Seleucid-Mauryan friendship. So now you have it, Jambudweep with 4 capitals. The main central capital was in Patliputra. The 4 capitals with 4 viceroys were Tosali in the east, Takshashila in the north, Suvamnagari in the south and Ujjaini in the center. Now we have the Swami or the king. So how did he rule? Was the idea of kingship absolute? Was he an autocrat, one of those red queen kind of monarchs, off with his head if I don't like him? Absolutely not. The Indic idea of kingship comes from the necessity to fight Matsya Nyaya, which is the big fish eating the small fish, as in the powerful terrorizing the weak. So the king's first duty is Rakshan of the weak. His next duty is Palan and Poshan, which means there must be economic activity and the king must help and encourage and sustain that so that his subjects can reach prosperity. And once they do, what is his next duty? That is called Yogakshem, which means that that objective which has been achieved must be enjoyed. So the king had to do this Yogakshem. He had the duty of protection for which he used the Dand or the army. He was the father of his subjects. He was the person who sustained the social order, the Varnashram Dharma, and the balance between the four Purusharths of Dharma, Arth, Kam and Moksha. Now, if the king did not have absolute power, what was it that stopped him from becoming autocratic and doing whatever he wanted to do? The first one was consultation. He was supposed to consult with his ministers, both the inner council and the Mantri Parishad. The second was that he was the upholder of Dharma, and Dharma exerted this pressure on him. The Raj Purohit exerted this moral pressure on him, which is why the difference between the church and the state has never been there in India, which is why this imported concept of secularism really does not fit into our own Indic thinking. Ethics and Dharma play a very big role in the conduct of the king. And then of course his people could become restive if he became an extremely aggressive and autocratic king. The main thing, however, was his training, his skills, the ideas that were imparted to him right from the beginning, which are also included in chapter 1 of the Arthashastra. He had a rigorous routine to follow. Just look at the dincharya of this most hard-working man. He got to sleep only for 4.5 hours in a day. The rest of the time was taken up in meeting with his spies. He met with his spies 2-3 times a day, taking reports from his counselors, from his senapati, from his minister of finance, meeting the public, meeting foreign potentates, appointing high officials, and indeed giving himself up completely to the work of the nation. He also had a little time, personal time, to spend with his queens. He had a little bit of time for self-study, for meditation, for meeting with his guru. And by the way, he also met with his cook every day, interesting, as also with his physician. So as you can see from this, the practice of kingship was not an autocratic but a very hard-working one. Now I will come to something I had promised to discuss in the last episode, that is a comparison between Chandragupta's Jambudweep and Modi's India. So what are the commonalities? The first, of course, is that we are on the same piece of land, the same Bhukhand, the Indian subcontinent. We are, of course, modern India, much smaller than modern India was. There are a number of countries today where there was only one at the time. We have Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc. But the land from the Himalayas remains the same. What next? The other thing is that there is the polity. So Chandragupta ran a multilingual, multi-religious and multi-ethnic polity. It is true for us today, even in modern India, we are an extremely diverse country. There is another commonality which may not be very clear on the surface, but that is the way in which we look at ourselves. Indians have always looked at themselves as a civilizational state. Again, we are not a Westphalian nation state, but a civilizational nation state where loyalties are concentric and they do not conflict with each other. Local, regional and national loyalties are all beautifully fitted together. So the great tradition subsumes all the smaller traditions, and that has been so for this country forever and ever. The same for Mauryan times and the same for today. You know, the Mauryans have been the political unifiers of this subcontinent, and it is as such that they live in our collective memory. They are the essence of the sovereignty of this subcontinent. Not for nothing has modern India incorporated the lion capital and the peacock into its national symbols. Not for nothing did Chandragupta of the Gupta dynasty also call himself after an illustrious predecessor. And what about Firoz Shah Tughlaq? In the 14th century, he uprooted two of the Ashokan pillars and brought them to his own capital because he wanted to partake of that same royalty. There are so many other things. The Rupya comes from the Arthashastra. The Uttarapath is what we today know as NH1. There are many things, and the more we study the past, the more these things will come up front. Let me end on the lighter note. You know that the king slept only for 4.5 hours in the night? I believe that is what the Pradhan Sevak of this country does too. Isn't that interesting? So we will get to know more interesting facts like this in the later episodes as they come. Watch with me as we explore more of Maurya Lok. Namaskar.
In the next episode, we will take a look at the second Ang of the Saptang state, Amatya or minister. In our framework, it symbolizes administration. So we'll be introduced to Amatya Chanakya and his principles of administration set down in the Arthashastra.